Hello and welcome to this webinar around Office 365 E5 SKU. I'm Jess Meats, I'm one of the presenters today. I'm also joined by my colleague Harry Reid and Robert-Jan Gerrits from Microsoft. Thank you for attending today, and I'd like to hand over to Harry to do a short introduction to Core.
Okay, so good morning everyone. My name is Harry Reid and I am the account manager for both local government and membership here at Core. Today I'm conscious that we're running slightly late, so I'll just give a quick overview of Core and the kind of technologies that we cover as a company. So this first slide really is just about us and the values that we have as a business, obviously putting our customers first, taking a lot of care in our people and priding ourselves on responsiveness and expertise. Okay, so in terms of the areas that we cover as a business, we have a big foothold in SharePoint and Dynamics CRM, and also Office 365 and managed services. We work closely with K2 as one of our partners, and we have specific offerings for government as well. And you can see as well we have a lot of expertise in sort of the rest of the Microsoft stack in terms of Yammer and Exchange and Intune.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. So my name is Robert-Jan Gerrits. I'm a technology strategist at Microsoft, and I'll use a couple of slides to kind of set the scene for digital transformation and what Microsoft is positioning with regards to reinventing productivity in that space. So when we talk about digital transformation, I think the one thing I really would like to get across is that digital transformation is actually happening as we speak, right? So in the past we talked about digital transformation as kind of the next big revolution, but actually when we talk about 2017, digital transformation is a fact. It's happening all around us. It's shaping different markets. It's shaping the way customers and especially organizations are trying to come up with new products and new services, and obviously that leads to a lot of business transformation as well. So when we talk about digital transformation, it's not just about trying to get the organizations to change, but of course there are a lot of challenges as well. And the first thing that people probably are aware of is that, if you compare it with, let's say, 5 years ago, we probably are members of teams, twice the number of teams that you would be like 5 to 10 years ago. If I look at myself, I'm a part of a team that looks after Skype for Business. I have some V-team or virtual teams I'm being member of, and if I compare it with kind of, as I said, 5 years ago, then I'm definitely in part of many more teams as I was before. At the same time, because of all the kind of technology innovations that we've had, everybody is very used to using mobile business applications, and of course that actually changes the way people work and as well as organizations work. But talking about business transformation, talk about digital transformation and so on, a lot of opportunity, but of course also still a lot of challenges as well. And one of those, of course, is the whole thing about information overload. Although we are trying to kind of get, especially also within Microsoft, people to move away from email. There's a lot of information that's being still kind of loaded and wasted by using emails as well as other type of communication. So whatever we can do to kind of find a better way of dealing with that information would actually help everybody's consumption and the way people can be productive. So having said that, with kind of the challenges as well as kind of the business opportunity, when we talk about digital transformation, there are mainly 4 phases that normally customers and organizations are going through to try to actually, make digital transformation effect. So organizations will look at transforming their products, looking at kind of new products they can bring to market as rapidly as possible, new services and so on. to be able to do that, they will have to optimize the operations within the organizations. And again, to optimize their operations, they really would like to empower the employees so that, you know, people can work, collaborate faster, can create those new products and services faster, etc. And of course, that then will lead to kind of new ways of engaging with their customers. When we talk about digital transformation in kind of the sense of E5, the digital transformation, the reinventing productivity SKU, then we really are focused on empowering our employees. So the next couple of slides I really kind of talk about, you know, how does Microsoft see this empowering of employees by using Office 365 to be able to deliver to this. And when we talk about Office 365 as kind of the mechanism to reinvent productivity, there are kind of four main pillars that we would like normally to talk about. The first one is about collaboration. Today we are using Skype for Business to actually, you know, share this information with you guys. So, you know, Skype for Business is kind of central to that, but at the same time, SharePoint, Exchange Online, etc. are also part of the collaboration story. When we talk about mobility, we're thinking about, you know, obviously mobile devices that are able to kind of use applications like Skype for Business, Exchange Online, etc. to actually run this application on the mobile. But at the same time, we could see mobility as a situation where it doesn't really matter what type of end device I'm using. I would really like to use my experience on whatever device I have available. So, for example, in the office, I'm using my Surface Pro, but as soon as I'm in the car, I might be using my mobile, and when I'm actually on the train, I would like to look at my emails, and again, I'm using my kind of a mobile. But I shouldn't really have to kind of keep on using different applications to actually be able to be productive. So mobility could also be taking your work experience with you on whatever kind of device you're working on. Then the third pillar that is obviously also very important is the intelligence side of things. So I was talking about kind of being overloaded by information about data, emails, documents, etc. And whatever kind of the services that we provide as Microsoft, to be able to provide some patterns and to kind of bubble up information that's really relevant to your day-to-day job, that would actually help anybody to actually be more productive. So as a result, you know, those three kind of are the main pillars, but those three pillars, meaning collaboration, mobility, and intelligence, are no good if you actually really don't trust the services that we are providing. So all around those kind of three pillars, collaboration, mobility, intelligence, very much is Microsoft's aim to provide a lot of security, and so that every customer should be able to feel trust in actually using those services. Now, a first thing I would like to kind of share with you is kind of the introduction of a new kind of, I would say, platform we kind of positioned it as which is Microsoft Teams. So I hope most of you actually have seen and have heard about Teams, but for anybody that actually is kind of new to this, I would really like to kind of position the Microsoft Teams platform. So initially when Teams was kind of introduced into Microsoft ourselves, I thought, oh man, that there's another kind of new application I have to get my head around, and you know, are we just kind of coming up with a new application just to see what the uptake is going to be, or is it something different? And the whole reason we actually kind of positioned and introduced Teams was because, again, coming back to the fact that, you know, people are working in twice as many teams as they would do 5 years ago, we are trying still to find, you know, better ways to collaborate and so on. And Teams is very much kind of focused on that. But instead of actually trying to introduce kind of a new platform or a new collaboration tool, you should see Teams really as kind of the almost like a platform that sits on top of all the kind of applications and services that you should be already familiar with. So rather than actually seeing Teams as kind of a new collaboration platform, it actually is kind of a solution that actually is leveraging all the things in Office 365 that most of you are familiar with, including Outlook, including SharePoint, including Skype, as well as Office 365 Pro Plus and so on. So to kind of summarize that, we really are trying to kind of use all those different workloads that we already have in Office 365 and actually provide Teams as kind of almost like a new user interface to even make it easier to collaborate. For people that are familiar with groups, it's actually kind of, the next phase of groups, I would say. So groups was kind of introduced to actually help organizers of for example, projects or teams to very quickly set up a new collaboration space. So in the past, when we didn't have groups and teams, what you would have to do is you have to think about, I have to set up an alias for creating a team. I have to probably create a shared calendar. I need some a space to, for example, save my documents. It could be OneDrive, it could be a SharePoint site, and so on. The idea about groups that actually, without actually having to think about those, I just set up a group, and I really would like in the background automatically that that kind of group was setting up the shared team space, we set up a shared calendar, we set up a shared inbox, and so on. And so you didn't have to think, what workload do I need to set up and configure to be able to make this work? So by just setting up a group, automatically all those things will be taken care of in the background. And Teams is kind of in a way the next step up on that. So when you look at Teams, if you haven't seen it in action yet, I would really recommend you to kind of go to Microsoft website and actually download and play around with it. But in essence, it's really kind of a collaboration tool that allows us to chat very nicely within Teams. It's more like persistent chat. So it allows teams very quickly to share information, share different types of projects people are working on. It is persistent, so you can easily go back and see what the rest of the team has done in the days before or even in the weeks before. It's a hub for teamwork, so you can, as a team, you can work on the applications you're all used to, including Excel, Word, PowerPoint, etc. You can customize it. There are APIs available to introduce other types of applications in there. You could also use even bots to kind of automate certain tasks as well. And again, just to make sure we want to kind of surround all those things with security to be able to kind of trust the service we're providing. So Teams was launched in November last year, or I should say launched. It was actually put in preview in November last year. GA is actually happening as we speak, and of course going forward you will see a lot of additional features being added to that platform. And so kind of the reason I wanted to bring it up is that because when we talk about reinvented productivity, there's so much happening in this space, and Teams is a great example. And then what we talk about today about E5 is very much the all-up SKU to provide not only collaboration tools, but also the security side of things as well as analytics. And during the webinar today, we go through all those three different pillars. Jess will start with security, I will talk about voice, and then we'll finish off with analytics.
Okay, thank you. So talking about security, it's one of those things that's vital across pretty much everything you do with technology. You want to make sure it's controlled, you want to make sure it's safe, and you want to protect all of the content that's sitting within your system. And this can be your documents, this can be your data. So when you think about security, one of the first things you think about is that protection piece. How are we controlling authorization? Are people getting in? Is it encrypted? And actually one of the biggest risks to data tends to be people being careless with their passwords or using passwords which aren't secure, and people get hold of those and they get into the system and the authentication goes, oh yeah, they've used the username and password, I know who they are, lets them in, and then you've got a data breach. So one of the things you need to think about is actually tracking the behavior, looking at the users in order to identify when you have had a breach, making sure that if something does happen, if somebody is careless, if there is a problem, that you know about it as soon as it happens. And then that brings us on to the third piece, which is having a response. Because there's some scary statistics out there in the security marketplace around how long it takes people to respond to a threat. So if they discover that they've got a breach, sometimes it's not until days, weeks or months after the breach has occurred. There's then maybe another month or two of running around trying to figure out what they should do about it. And that's just, It's not good behavior, it's not best practice, and that's something that we want to bring down. So in the case of Office 365, specifically the E5 suite, there are a few pieces that are very important. One is something called Advanced Threat Protection, and this is around making sure that malware, viruses, dangerous software doesn't get through the boundaries into your organisation. And there's several pieces to this. One is around protection of attachments, and a similar related one around protection of URLs, so time of click protection. And essentially the idea behind this is if somebody in your organisation receives an email, it's got an attachment or maybe there's a link in it. Essentially what happens is Office 365 takes that link, it takes that attachment into an isolated virtual environment and tries opening it up. If it's all perfectly safe and standard, great. Everything gets passed through, goes into the email, not a problem. Similarly, the link in the email, you click on it, it opens up a website. Is this trying to download any scripts? Is this trying to download any malware? No, okay, you're fine. So it has this isolated virtual environment, this detonation chamber that lets you take these potentially suspicious items that are coming in from outside the organisation and test them all out. And the time of click protection is what allows you to do this at the time of click, because there may be a perfectly safe URL at the time the email was sent, and somehow somebody's got in, it's now no longer safe, there's now some malware embedded in that site. At the time the user clicks that, Office 365 goes and tests and makes sure that that's safe. The second bullet point, the dynamic delivery, is actually talking about what the user sees while all this is going on. So if you do get sent an email with attachment, the email can still come through to your inbox, you can still see that it's there, but actually it doesn't have the attachment yet until the system has verified that it's safe. And if it takes you several minutes before you get back to your inbox and you notice the email, you may never have even noticed that it was missing. But for that period of time, you see the email and you just get this little notification that it's being tested for safety. And all of this, you've got reporting, you've got analytics, you can track the behaviour, you can block and allow certain users, certain emails, certain domain names, if you know people are suspicious or if you know people can be trusted. But this can actually be taken a step further. So there is something in the Microsoft security toolbox called Advanced Threat Analytics, and this is where it gets really clever, because this uses machine learning to track how your users behave and spot things that are anomalous. The obvious example that's been around for a little while is if you open up a file in London and then 5 minutes later somebody logs in with the same credentials from Paris, the system knows that a person couldn't get that far that fast, so it can block somebody out. But this goes a step further, and it looks for suspicious behaviour. It looks for things like, this person has entered the wrong password 10 times in a row, I think they're just trying to brute force this, and you can have rules in place that stop things. It could be somebody's logging in from a machine they don't normally log in, using a different browser in a different part of the world. Maybe that's somebody just checking their email when they're on holiday. It could be perfectly safe. It could also be a threat. So what you could do there is trigger maybe multi-factor authentication and say, okay, we're going to send a code to your phone to make sure you are who you say you are. But you could have other behaviour which actually automatically triggers a block. So somebody might come into your system on a regular day, and normally they go to this team site and they go to that SharePoint page and then they check their email and they have certain behaviour that's normal. And then one day somebody logs in and they download your entire database. That's suddenly flagged as suspicious anomalous behaviour, and that could trigger a block action. So you can have these different behaviours, and machine learning is running in the background to track this is normal behaviour for these users and this is anomalous user behaviour in order to identify when to step in. So that's very powerful. There are a few other pieces which are worth knowing about for compliance. So you've got data loss prevention in Office 365. So this allows you to have certain patterns of data that you're concerned about, usually personally identifiable data. So things like passport numbers, national insurance numbers, credit card numbers, certain patterns of data that you want to keep control of. So you can have rules in place which say you can't send an email outside the organisation that contains certain types of data unless you fill out this field that explains what your business justification is and it gets signed off by somebody. So you can have these rules in place to control what does or doesn't happen with that personally identifiable data. You can also have deletion policies across your documents, across your emails. So people keep things forever. They think, oh, this might be useful at some point in the future, and your file system ends up clogging up with a lot of stuff that is not actually needed. And you can have deletion policies which go in and, depending on the content, delete things after a certain period of time. And this can be very useful for making sure that you meet compliance rules about how long you're storing sensitive data for. All of this is encrypted. And you also get e-discovery on the content that's sitting in Exchange and SharePoint Online. So e-discovery uses search capabilities, and it allows you to track, do reports on anything that matches what you're querying. So it could be somebody comes in and says, okay, I've got freedom of information request, I want to know what data you've got on me. You can go in and you can search your document store, you can search your emails, and you can track all of that. You could also have somebody coming in and saying, yep, we're going to sue you because you didn't do this thing you promised. And you can go in again and you can look for all of the emails and say, okay, when did we communicate with them? We need a report of all of this, so that you can go through and you can check, did you actually breach the contract? Have you got evidence? And being able to keep that on a legal hold that actually overrules the deletion policies, so that when you're sitting there, you've got the evidence of, actually, no, we didn't promise that. Here's the email trail. Here's the communications. So you've got all of that data sitting in there, and e-discovery makes it easier to find it. And you've got some e-discovery in some of the SKUs of Office 365, but one of the things that the E5 SKU gives you is advanced e-discovery. And this follows the same principles, but gives you more control over, or gives you more information around which files are likely to be relevant. So it can, rather than just having one long list, it can sort through that and say, okay, based on the search query, these are the files that are going to be most significant. So it's applying a lot more intelligence to it. And the final piece I have on this slide deck is Customer Lockbox. And this is essentially a set of policies and controls around who has access to your data from inside Microsoft. So if you have a support call and you've got a problem and you want somebody from Microsoft to get into your system to fix it for you, there are processes and procedures in place by which they have to request permission. They get access to your system only when you've approved it, only when it's signed off on, and only for the period of time necessary to actually solve the problem. So the lockbox is all about you controlling your data, not Microsoft. So there's quite a lot going on with security and compliance. But for now, I'm going to hand back over to Robert to talk about the meetings and voice.
Thank you, Jess. So, indeed, from a meeting and voice perspective, as I mentioned before, we're really trying to position Skype for business, right? So, just a kind of a quick bit of background on, how we came to Skype for Business. Well, we actually acquired Skype probably 4 or 5 years ago now. At the time, we were calling the product still Link. We had 9 consecutive years of double-digit growth. We have a lot of licenses out there, over 100 million licenses, probably not all on voice, but mainly on IMAP presence as well as conferencing. And Skype at the time, the 500 million stands for the 500 million downloads of Skype on an Android platform, which is kind of the 4th app ever that did that. 50 billion stands for the 50 billion minutes that are being done on a per monthly basis for voice and video, and 38% is actually 38% of all the international traffic from a telephony perspective was going over the Skype network, and actually still doing it today. So those were actually the real reasons why Microsoft acquired Skype, and we paid quite a lot of money for it. So a lot of organizations were asking us, why did you buy Skype? And these are really the reasons, right? The massive reach of the kind of telephony network, as well as the uptake by consumers using it as a video and telephony platform. So that means, we are talking today about Skype for Business. We kind of changed the name from Link to Skype roughly, I think, probably 2 years ago now. And initially, when we actually moved from a name from OCS to Link, there was an uptake in the market about the branding. But as soon as we kind of announced kind of going from Link to Skype for Business, there was a way more uptake in the market to think about, why did Microsoft actually kind of change the name? And the reason, of course, for that was because we had, I think, roughly 350 million people that were using Skype as a consumer on a daily basis. So from a marketing perspective, really, really interesting. Obviously, the first question we normally got was, is Skype for Business free? Because Skype Consumer is free. And obviously the answer to that is actually no, it isn't. It's really kind of the next iteration of the OCS and the Link and so on platform. So when we launched Skype for Business, it was very much initially kind of a kind of almost like a change of branding to start off with some different color schemes, even more blue than it was before, some round circles, etc. And that was kind of in May, June timeframe in 2015 that we announced that and actually launched the product. I think the biggest changes to the platform itself were announced in December 2015. And that's really the time when we announced that, a promise that we had done for a couple of years, that we said, we are going to provide voice services in the cloud. By the announcement in December 2015, we said, actually, we are going to deliver on this promise now. So we made two announcements, one with regards to meetings and one with regards to voice, meaning kind of as a PBX replacement platform. So when we talk about meetings, the two announcements were meeting broadcast and PS10 conferencing. And from a voice perspective, we really made the announcement about Cloud Pbx. So I'm going to dive very quickly into both of those different services. So first of all, from a meetings perspective, we have, and as people are on the call, hopefully are using Skype for Business in their day-to-day life, but if you are not, Skype for Business is really kind of a full meeting platform, right? So you can use it for obviously point-to-point or peer-to-peer type of conversations, but you can send out invitations like we did today to actually invite people to a conference call, including voice, video, desktop share, PowerPoint share, etc. So from online meetings and especially also from a video room system perspective, we had things like Service Hub and Skype Room systems that allow us to kind of kit out a video room to be able to kind of take part in video conversations and video meetings using Skype for Business. The two things that you can see here in gray was kind of not completely available was the thing called PS10 conferencing and meeting broadcast. When I say not completely available, I mean completely available from a Microsoft perspective as a kind of a specific service by Microsoft. So Office 365 obviously provided meeting services before, but we normally had to use ACP partners or the conferencing partners to provide telephony bit into this. The announcement in December 2015 was that actually Microsoft is providing their own native service to actually allow customers to dial in directly into the Office 365 conferencing solution. The meeting broadcast is actually another type of service where rather than having kind of a full collaboration session, it's really trying to service situations where you would like to kind of stream a webinar or a broadcast out to many more people than, for example, just 3 or 4. So very quickly, some information on each of those. First of all, I'll go one back. That was too quick. When we talk about meeting broadcast, as mentioned, it's really positioned for situations where you would like to stream a broadcast. So if you're familiar with kind of the limitations and the capabilities of kind of Skype for Business as a conference platform, the limits you have is that if you're using an Office 365 service, you can get up to 250 people into a single conferencing call. All those conferencing participants can actually use voice, video, desktop sharing, whiteboarding, PowerPoint sharing, etc. And so it's very much aimed for collaboration. And as I mentioned, it can scale up to 250 users. If for whatever reason those numbers were not enough, you could actually kind of think about an on-premise deployment, and then you can get up to 1,000 users. But there are scenarios where you might actually want to reach out to more than those 250 or to those 1,000 users. And in those kind of situations, we can actually now position Skype meeting broadcast. The idea is that the presenters are using Skype for Business as a client to be able to present their desktop or their PowerPoint, while the attendees are actually using a browser to be able to take part in this conference call. So the numbers we're talking about now is that we can actually scale up to roughly 10,000 users in a single meeting broadcast. Sorry. So the idea really is that we stream out the broadcast to the participants, and obviously the participants can pause the video, they can record the video, etc. And there are kind of three ways in a way to provide feedback to the presenters. One way is to actually embed a YAML feed into the stream, so people can actually follow the YAML stream and actually provide comments in that way. We can also provide a Q&A manager, so whenever you as a presenter would like to ask some questions to the audience, you can actually use the Q&A manager. And we have something called, which is the Bing Pulse, that allows attendees to actually vote on if they agree with the presenter or not. So you can actually say, yes, I agree with what the presenter is saying, or no, and you see the kind of this pulse in the background showing that information. So that's really what meeting broadcast is about. So that's kind of the first announcement with regard to meetings in December 2015. The second one was about PSTN conferencing, as I mentioned. So I very simple slide. Conferencing, as everybody knows, is providing a telephone number to an audience and actually allow everybody to actually dial into this specific conference call. Now, this is nothing new. This has been around for really many years, right? Every service provider and telco would actually provide such a service. But in the past, in Office 365, what we had to do is we used a third party to create that connection between the telephony network, which is there mentioned as PSTN, and our Office 365 data centers. So the announcement in December really was about, Microsoft has now provided whatever you call it, a gateway or a SIP trunk between the telephony network and our data centers. And what that means is actually Microsoft can natively provide you with a conferencing dial-in number, which you can then use to actually send out to your customers or any participants in your meeting. And therefore, people are now able to not only use it for video or web collaboration, but also as a PSTN conferencing audio bridge. Now, as I mentioned, there's nothing new from a technology perspective in that sense. It's been around for ages. A lot of telcos and service providers are providing this. But what is really kind of interesting in our minds for our end customers is the fact that it's a very, hopefully, attractive commercial proposition. Normally when customers are using kind of a hosted solution to actually provide their audio bridges, they probably are paying per user per minute to be able to have such a conferencing capability. And so if, for example, you have a conference call going on, and let's say for argument's sake, 5 pence per minute everybody has to pay, that means that every participant in a conference call normally has to pay around £3. Now, I just give this as an example, the 5 pence per minute. There are telcos that are quoting more, there are telcos that are quoting less, but eventually, if you can get your hands on how much you spend on this, you can get a good idea of how much conferencing costs will actually cost your organization. If you kind of compare it with the way we are in Microsoft kind of pricing this up from PSTN conferencing perspective, we actually are charging $4 per user per month, which is kind of without discount, etc. And if I think, in kind of pound terms and think about Brexit, it's roughly, let's say, for argument's sake, £3. Then that would mean that if anybody makes a call which costs 5 pence per minute for an hour in a month's time, it's the same money you would pay for the Skype for Business PSTN conferencing bit. So that means any other call that anybody makes after this first initial call of an hour will be in a way free of charge. So I don't know how many calls you normally make on a daily or on a weekly basis, but I easily make 3, 4, 5 calls per week. And every time times £3, that actually can sum up to a lot of money. So hopefully, the commercials actually speak for themselves and should be pretty attractive to you if you are using a hosted solution to provide conferencing capabilities to your end users. So that's with regards to PSTN conferencing. That was so PSTN conferencing and broadcast meetings. Those were the announcements made in December with regards to meetings. The second big announcement was about voice. And what we really want to kind of provide as a service is something to do with PBXs. PBX is just a kind of a very difficult abbreviation for a telephone system, right? And if you are familiar with telephony, I completely apologize for this slide, but it's just kind of very quickly showing you what normally is involved with making a conference call. I'm going to click this, I'm just going to go back. So if you are making a call in an organization, you have a telephone system in place. What that telephone system normally does is actually routes calls from one extension to another. If I have the number 123 and my colleague has the number 124, I can dial 124 and automatically the telephone system will actually check out where's the extension and it will think out, okay, that person is sitting in the room next to you and route the call to that handset that's kind of equivalent to the 124 extension. If I dial a different number that the PBX doesn't know about or the telephone system doesn't know about, for example, I'm trying to call my parents in the Netherlands, then I'll probably dial, I don't know, +31. Immediately the PBX realizes that, hey, that's a number I don't realize, I don't recognize. I have to talk to the telephony network, and so what I do is I'll throw the kind of call out to the telephony network. And the telephony network is what I put in this picture as PSTN. It stands for Public Switch Telephony Network. It's kind of the telephony network that everybody's familiar with. The telephony network normally just routes calls, right? Whether you are working from home, whether you are on your mobile, it's just taking care of routing those calls. So as soon as kind of an organization's PBX is not recognizing the number, it will actually talk to the telephony network to actually send that call out. So in this picture, there are two things really important. One is the PBX itself, the hardware, the telephone switch that's required to actually do the routing. And the second thing is this kind of connection to the telephony network. And that's normally a kind of a contract you have in place with your telco. That could be a BT, Verizon, AT&T, any of those kind of telcos would be able to kind of provide you that connection to the telephony network. And so an organization that has a PBX in place will have will have both a kind of physical PBX switch as well as a contract in place to make those calls outside the organization. Now, the whole concept of Cloud Pbx is addressing the first part, the physical installation of the telephone switch. And as I mentioned before, the telephone switch is just really routing calls from an extension to another extension. Now, routing calls, or routing in general, is something we can do very easily in the cloud with software. So if you can see this slide, we just kind of now moved in a way the PBX from the on-premises organization here to Office 365. And what you see here, somebody is trying to call from the customer premises to an extension. The dotted line is just signaling and it's saying, hey, I tried to dial 124, where's that user? The telephone switch signals back and saying, actually, that user is sitting next to you, and therefore I route the call to the telephone into the person sitting next to you in the next room. So the signaling will go back to the data center, but the voice will stay local. If this person now is trying to dial a external number, let's say somebody in Reading, so she dials 0118, the same thing will happen. It will signal up to the data center and the PBX capability there and say, hey, where's 018? Of course, the Cloud Pbx realizes that that's a number we don't know, and therefore we'll have to throw it out to the telephony network. So in this picture, we now show kind of this Cloud Connector Gateway, or CCE, sometimes called Cloud Connector Edition, that connects the on-premise user via the Cloud Pbx to the telephony network. So in this case, 018 is being called or being dialed by the end user. The routing mechanism in Office 365 says, hey, I don't know this number, just throw it out to the telephony network. It then signals back to the gateway saying, connect to the telephony network and just send it out and just route to wherever it needs to go. And so with the Cloud Pbx, we really are taking care of the physical investment that normally an organization has to do into a PBX. So that's kind of the concept of Cloud Pbx. If you then talk about PSTN calling, well, thinking about the PSTN conferencing bit where Microsoft said, hey, let's connect the telephony network to our data centers, obviously we can do this to the same thing with the Cloud Pbx. So if I just build this picture out, seen this before, right? So now in this case, if the lady is again trying to dial 018, meaning a Reading number, the Cloud Pbx says, hey, I don't know this number, I need to talk to the telephony network. Rather than going back to the gateway on premises to connect out to the telephony network, we might as well use the capability or the connection that we have between our data centers and telephony network. And so throw it out directly from our Office 365 data centers to the telephony network. And so in this case, rather than using a third party as the telco, Microsoft becomes the telco and provides those kind of call charges, right? So what this means now is that Cloud Pbx is routing the calls, and then the PSTN calling, but it's really where Microsoft becomes the telco in the sense that, you know, Microsoft will charge for those calls and create call bundles to be able to make outbound calls outside the organization. And that's pretty much what the Cloud Pbx does. So to summarize, Cloud Pbx is really kind of the replacement from the expensive PBX equipment that normally organizations use to create or have a telephone system in place. Quite often, organizations will have a long-standing relationship with their telcos because, you know, they have a contract in place, maybe running for 3 to 5 years, and so it might be quite difficult to be able to break out of those contracts, probably with a penalty clause. So therefore, you know, the kind of a cloud connector or kind of a gateway on-premise could actually help you to keep those telco agreements in place. If you're in a situation where you think, hey, my contract comes up for renewal anyway, I'm going to have a look at what Microsoft charges for PSTN calling, then that could be another option, and therefore Cloud Pbx for PSTN calling would allow you to provide a full solution completely sitting into the cloud. And with that, let me hand back to Jess.
Okay, thank you. So the third of the three pillars that you saw earlier around what E5 provides is around analytics. So there's two pieces to this. One is Power BI and one is My Analytics. So Power BI, it's been around a little while. It sort of started out as plugins to Excel. But what you can do with Power BI is you can build some very rich, highly interactive visualizations on your data. So you can pull in data from a range of locations, including sort of potentially SQL Server and things like that, but also cloud services. So there are a lot of new data service connectors coming, and it feels like every time I log into the portal there have been new ones added, that you can pull in this data, you can visualize it in attractive ways, you can connect to tools like SharePoint and OneDrive for Business, and connect it back to Excel. And I'm actually just going to do a quick demo of this. So here I've got the Power BI portal and I've got a nice little report with some different visualizations. But part of the power of this is the interactivity. So I can come in, I can click on different sections, and it goes and highlights the relevant bits in the other visuals. I've even got nice things like play by time animations. And it's designed to be easy and intuitive to build these reports. So you don't have to be a data specialist, you don't have to be a SQL expert. You can build these things with minimal training in a similar way to creating things in Excel. I mentioned the data connections. There are a lot of services that have got what are called content packs. So if you connect to one of these services, one of these content packs, you get the connection to the data, but it also comes with a few pre-configured reports and dashboards to speed things up. And there are a lot of different things in here. There's some you'd expect. So you've got various Azure things there, but you've also, if I scroll down a bit, you've got Google Analytics. Scroll down further, we've got a lot of connectors to various Dynamics, Microsoft Dynamics tools. But a bit further still, and we start getting Salesforce. So some of these are Microsoft, some of these are very much not Microsoft. But the system can connect to the data, it can pull this in, and you can build these slick interactive reports. But again, part of the power of it is how quickly and easily you can interact with this data. So I've got a nice little dashboard here, and I can start coming in here and say, how many projects? Just how many projects have we got data on? And apparently we've got 1,166 in this data set. But I might be interested in a specific type. So oil and gas. And apparently we've got 141 that are oil and gas. And I can start saying, yeah, show me that broken down by region. And we've now got a bar chart that uses region. So just by typing in questions, by using English language, it's giving me visuals. And if I want to, I can start playing around with this and saying, well, do I want a ring? Do I want pie chart? How do I want to present this data? How do I want to show this? And when I could apply filters, I could mess around with this some more. And when I'm done, I can say, yep, I like this visual. I'm just going to go and stick that back on my dashboard. So when I go back, we've got that little chart I put together is now part of my dashboard. So I'm really not kidding when I say it's very quick and simple to build these things. So the other piece of the analytics story is something called My Analytics. This was originally called Delve Analytics when I launched. And this is actually looking at your behavior in Office 365 and saying, how productive are you? How much time are you spending on email? How many hours were you working outside of business hours? Who are the people you work with most? But also, hey, these colleagues you haven't spoken to in several weeks, maybe you want to get in touch. But the bit that's really interesting is it can start making suggestions. So there was one week where I spent a lot of time going to the same meetings as one of my colleagues. And My Analytics sort of pops up and says, you know what, maybe you ought to sort of split up, and some of you go to, given there's two of you going to all of these, maybe you sort of split the workload and then sort of report back to each other to save a bit of time. Another suggestion which I found very amusing is one of the guys in our SharePoint team sends a lot of emails after hours, and he got a message popping up saying, you know, a lot of people are reading these emails after hours. Maybe it'd be more polite to wait until the morning to send these. So you get suggestions based on your activities of how to be more productive yourself, but also how to work with others. So there are a lot of different things as part of this, and I've talked about the different parts of Office 365. So we spent a lot of time today on these three, so the security, the analytics and voice, but there are still a lot of other things that are sort of existing parts of Office 365. So we can't forget the SharePoint, the Yammer, the Exchange and all of the other pieces that are part of this story. So the E5 includes all of those, so you're not losing anything if you move from, say, E1 or E3, but it gives you a whole lot more, and it gives you a lot more control. So that's it for the seminar today. We have gone through a lot rather quickly. If you want to know more about some of the capabilities, we've got a number of events, or we will be in touch, or you can get in touch with us. There's an email address on the screen if you want to have a follow-up meeting.
So thank you very much to Jess and to Robert for presenting today. I hope you've all found the webinar useful. Yeah, as Jess said, just quickly, I have listed a few of our upcoming events on this slide, and also the details for Mike McDade, who is our marketing manager here at Core. So if you want any further information about upcoming events and webinars, we do quite regularly hold SharePoint and Dynamics 365 events. My colleague Kathleen Greenan, who is our customer success manager here at Core, will also be following up with you following the webinar. But today's session has also been recorded, so we'll be uploading that to our YouTube channel, or we can send it to you directly as well if you want to watch it again.